Hi, I'm Donna Ray.
And I'm Al Wadley.
Welcome to our podcast, Feldenkrais for Life.
In each episode, we will discuss ideas and experiences pertaining to the Feldenkrais Method.
You're going to learn skills that will move pain to comfort, anxiety to ease, and we'll explore learning and how to spark creativity.
To learn more about Donna, visit her site at donnaray.com.
To find Al Wadley, go to achievingexcellence.com.
Hey, Donna.
Good morning, Al. Nice to see you here on Zoom.
Good to see you too. It's been a while.
It has been. Well, today we're going to talk about narrative integration and self-image, the Feldenkrais way.
Cool. And say more about that. What is narrative integration? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, narrative simply means the stories that we tell about ourselves and our lives. And we do that in so many different ways. So if we were to free associate and think about the categories of our lives, we would come up with a variety of narratives. So we could have a career business narrative, for example. It's like, say you meet somebody for the first time and they say, hey, what do you do for a living? You're going to give them a story about your life and how you spend your time in business. So for us, it would be as Feldenkrais practitioners or teacher trainers, whatever we do with the Feldenkrais method. And the fact of the matter is, both of us make a living with the Feldenkrais method. And we're dedicated to it personally for our own well-being. We provide it to people that we love, to our loved ones, and we have clients that come to us routinely. I would say our story, our narrative is congruent and it makes sense. It's coherent. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense. So for example, for ourselves, like you're mentioning, so we have a nice, really strong narrative of being successful practitioners and you're a successful trainer. Mm-hmm. And I could tell a story about how I built my practice, how I was committed to it, how I got my first Feldenkrais table, even before I joined the Feldenkrais training, because I decided this is what I was going to do. I was going to make a business out of it. And mm-hmm. This is going to be what I do the rest of my life. Wow. So I've proceeded to do that and to build a practice, which took a long time, I admit, to build a practice that sustained me financially. And that now, as a seasoned practitioner, I have a very nice, stable clientele, a really great practice, and a really nice new office. And that these things have progressed. So that's a kind of a nutshell story. And kind of what you were alluding to earlier, you said different categories. It's like we're going to have a different story in a different category, right? So yeah, maybe relationships would be different, or how we think about health, or our health story, or our family story, our family history, mm-hmm. or I don't know, what else? What other kind of categories are there that we'd have stories for?
Well, one that I really enjoy exploring with people is whether or not they have a sense of themselves as artists, or are they creative? And many people say, no, I'm not creative, and I don't do any kind of art. I haven't picked up a pencil or a paintbrush since I was in second grade. And so that's a very limited self-image when it comes to creativity and personal narrative. So when we explore that a little further, oftentimes I will say, well, how about your home? Do you decorate your home? Do you like flowers on the dining table? Oh, yeah, I get flowers every week. I love them. And how about your sofa? Do you have matching pillows on yours? Oh, yeah, I change them out all the time. It changes the room. I love the color. So if you start to delve a little bit deeper into how people are behaving and ask questions, they start to realize that they're creative and they're artistic. It just comes out in different ways. Or it may come out in how they dress. So you can see that people put together their shoes, their purses, their handbags, men, tuck in their t-shirt and wear a belt or not. It's like there are choices to be made, button-up shirts, plaid shirts, colorful shirts. There are lots of choices to be made when it comes to personal appearance. Well, those are creative choices. We're creating a palette for ourselves. So I love to see how people light up when they're questioned in a gentle, probing way, and how they start to change their self-image actually through the dialogue, through the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like that. So you help them to form a new narrative about themselves or reframe the narrative they've got and being able to really perceive how they are creative and they have creativity in their life. They can take that in and own that as part of their self-image, who they are.
Yeah. And so the next time somebody says, "Are you a creative person?" they might very well say, "Yeah, I love home decoration. I love choosing my clothes carefully. I love dressing my kids." All of those are creative choices. And then there's a feeling, I think, in oneself of some pride, this positive feeling of pride and self-appreciation when it comes to the realization that they have a skill that they haven't actually realized was a skill.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other examples?
One of the things you and I have talked about, and I think it's related to our Feldenkrais education and practice, is that as young people, we didn't feel particularly smart. We both have learning challenges. I have dyslexia, and you've had other difficulties too that you've talked about.
I got the dyslexia too.
You've got that too. You've got that one too. Well, if you don't get a grip on that, you can go through life feeling like you're not very smart. And that's not the case at all. I mean, you and I both figured it out and we're high achieving and we learned how to work with it. So mine is primarily numerical. It has to do with switching numbers around. So I realized that I wasn't good at doing my own bookkeeping because I made a lot of mistakes. Now, if I track things really well, I can pay attention, but it takes extra effort for me and it's quite slow. So, I have an incredible assistant that helps me with all of those kinds of things.
Good. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Along those lines, a story comes to mind. I struggled a lot in school. Mine was not with numbers, but with reading and letters and that kind of thing. It's very, very difficult for me. And so I had this kind of spark inside me that said, I knew I wasn't dumb, but for some reason I just couldn't learn the way that the school system wanted me to learn. But I made it through, and by some fortunate circumstances later in my life, in my early 20s, I got the opportunity to start recording workshops, trainings in psychotherapy, Ericksonian work, and NLP. And I was so blown away. So I went into this context, and it's like, I got to listen, I got to learn, I got to be active and participating. It's like learning by doing. And I was like, holy crap, this is what learning is. So there's a huge reframe for me right then that took place. Like, this is what learning is. And this is what's been missing from my life is this kind of learning. And I was just hungry for it. Because the academic stuff, the books, the testing and all that stuff did not fit for me. But that changed my whole narrative for learning and how I felt about myself as a learner. Set me on a path of learning about myself, and about the world, and about people that I'm still very grateful for today.
And I can see in your face, in your movements that you feel elated about that. You love learning. You're an incredible learner. You have tenacity. You know how to put your mind to something and stay with it and accomplish what you set out to do, just like you did with buying your Feldenkrais table in advance because you had a strong intention. And now those feelings that you had as a kid are not the dominant feelings that you have anymore about yourself as a learner. You know you're intelligent because of how you've lived your life. And so we can change That is a great example of change. And that was one of Dr. Feldenkrais's intention in teaching awareness through movement and even creating individual functional integration lessons with people, that they would change their self-image. And he would talk to them in a way that was very Ericksonian, like Ericksonian hypnotherapy or NLP like, and then he would tell them how smart they were, how they overcame something that someone else wouldn't be able to do. So he was working with movement, but he was working with self-image and how to change the brain. And that changed personal narrative. And when we feel good about ourselves, we want to do more. We're more highly motivated.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this aspect of practicing the Feldenkrais method. It's like the other day I told a woman, we were having a conversation, and I said, she had some fears about her future, with health fears, the health of her husband, variety of things. And so we talked about the fears, and then I said, well, what would you do if your husband passed away? And she said, well, I've had a lot of life experience so far, so I think that I would be able to adapt. And I said, that's right. Think of all the challenges you've already overcome. You're a very healthy adult that makes wise decisions in your life. And she looked at me with really big eyes, like, do you think so? And I said, absolutely. You've told me all of these stories of your life and how you've overcome them. And you've been a very successful woman. You've had a career, you have children, you have a marriage that you appreciate, a beautiful home. You're very capable. And I could see her updating her self-image as I was reflecting back to her information that she had given to me in other conversations. So that's a way of integrating narrative with someone, is highlighting these aspects of their stories and helping them weave together a new narrative. And so I know she left feeling really good about herself. And then we did a Feldenkrais functional integration lesson on the table. And she said, I feel marvelous. I feel like someone removed the container of my being. I feel so expanded. She said, I've read about this in books, but I've never had this feeling before. This is amazing.
Very different experience. Books.
It's very different. So, it's the way we listen, speak, reflect. We're giving assistance to people.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can change our narratives. We're talking about pretty positive narratives so far. But other people have areas of their lives that have difficult narratives, and they're not positive. And there's things that we can do to change those narratives. I don't remember the exact study. I remember hearing about this where it was done with teenagers, and they're having difficulties as teens, and they were told to write out their story, but to finish it, to write it, the positive outcome. And these teens that did this had better outcomes. They felt better about themselves. And over the long run, they had better, more successful lives because they changed their narrative. A lot of times we get stuck. I get, stuck around an issue or something I'm trying to resolve, or a negative feeling I've got, and there'll be a story attached to it, and I'll keep running up against this wall. It's like where it doesn't complete. So I've done practices like that where I get up to that point, and all right, I'm going to write out this story. I'm going to finish it. So I'm going to finish it in 3 different ways, complete the story in 3 different ways to try and just get my brain out of its stuck place and moving into different kinds of resourceful outcomes. And I think this is something that can be practiced. I think it's taught in certain areas. And I don't know a lot about what's going on in narrative therapy right now, but maybe you do. Maybe you can speak to that as a tool that people can use for themselves to help themselves get unstuck and find different ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is it can be part of narrative therapy. I think the idea of focusing on quote unquote narrative therapy is what we're talking about today, is listening really carefully to the ways that people talk about themselves and their life experience. And through question and reflection, people begin to create new stories that actually, in most cases, are a more positive reflection of how they've overcome things. Sometimes people talk about the hero's journey. I mean, we are the hero of our lives, and we've all had to overcome many, many obstacles, events, and problems. It's the part of living. So if we go through life and we see that we have been successful at overcoming things, then we feel like, oh, we can face the next problem that we have to solve or, address. But if we're interpreting events from the point of view, which can be a personal narrative of like, woe is me, all these bad things happen to me, my life is worse than anybody else's, that is more of a victim narrative, for example. And it's not very useful. We all have lots of problems, or we've had car accidents, or, people have passed away in our lives, or we've had financial problems or poor investments. I mean, the list goes on and on. You don't know. I can't think of a person who hasn't had multiple pretty big problems in their lives. So the aspect of solution, overcoming, reestablishing oneself, regaining footing, resilience, as we refer to it in the Feldenkrais Method so often, creates more strength and fortitude in life and tenacity, and we all need that.
Yeah, you mentioned the hero's journey, which I think is really interesting. I had kind of an epiphany this summer around the hero's journey. I always kind of thought of it as like, oh, this is a narrative pattern that's pulled out of, historical narratives. Like Joseph Campbell referenced a lot of historical stories that he pulled out that pattern from. And so I thought, well, that's kind of an out there thing. But then I had this realization. It's like, oh, we're actually all living that story. It's not something that is being told to us or is for, big stories of heroes and such. But it's our story that we actually have all these different challenges. We have these guides that come into our life. We have these opportunities to learn, these difficulties and challenges that we overcome. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. It's like you said, we're the hero. We're each the hero of our own story, of our own journey. And that made me think about Dr. Feldenkrais. And he wrote about this in the beginning of Awareness of Movement. I think in some other books too, he talks about how, as we develop, we learn to be good girls and boys. We are shaped to fit into our family system. We're shaped to fit into our society. And there's a point when we start to move away from that we make a choice. Are we going to carry on those family patterns? We're going to continue to be the good girl and boy that we were shaped in to be? Or are we going to set out on an adventure to really find our true self, to become who we really are, to become our own authority and fulfill our own values? And I think that's really what Feldenkrais is after in this work of changing the self-image, is like to allow us to be and to embody fully who we are without that history of development where we were constrained, told to sit and still and be good girls and boys and, fit into society, that kind of thing, which is important. I mean, we all have to go through that phase, I think. Otherwise, society would be chaos, right? So we go through that phase, then what do? We have that choice point. And Feldenkrais wants us to make that choice to be fully who we are, fully ourselves, and to embody that. And that was a bit of an epiphany I had this summer. And this whole story narrative thing.
That's so important. It's very important. And the lessons that he developed for all of us to do create a self-image of ease and efficiency and capability. So when we move so that all of our skeletal parts, all of the neuromuscular system is working in harmony, we feel a great sense of flow and ease and capability. And that sense of confidence and capability bridges into all areas of our lives. And that would be our next discussion, talking about state shifting, and how we can use movement and breathing and change perspective. But we're talking about storytelling today and self-image and how we need to pay attention if we want. I mean, nobody needs to do anything, but if there's a desire for freedom, I believe personal freedom comes from the ability to change personal narrative because it gives us motivation and the curiosity to delve into things in new ways. So if you haven't picked up a paintbrush since you were in second grade and you feel intimidated, it might really be a benefit to take a painting class. Maybe you won't become the best artist in the world, but you'll have a reference to what it means to paint, or music for that matter. I love to take voice lessons. They're just so much fun. It's energizing. I don't feel gifted with a voice to, stand up in front of a group and sing. I can sing along in a choir. But just the confidence of hearing your own voice and having someone direct you and use your physical well-being, your breath, your movement to stand tall and sing out is quite a wonderful experience. So if you haven't done that, listeners, take a few voice lessons. It changes self-image. It gives you confidence. Learning something new is a bright moment in life.
I have done voice lessons. I work with my voice a lot, and I really got a lot of personal benefit from that. It really does change the self-image. It changes the way your self-image sounds.
Yeah, that too.
Your self-image.
And that's also narrative, isn't it?
It is. I wanted to also kind of go back to the hero's journey and Feldenkrais lessons, because a lot of Feldenkrais lessons are like little stories. And most of Feldenkrais lessons have within them some little challenge or some big challenge that we have to figure out. And it's very interesting. How do we approach that challenge when it comes about? And it may be something where, we're differentiating parts like the eyes from the head and the neck or something like that, or we're trying to reach, slide the hand down the leg to reach the foot with the straight leg, and it's, challenge or something like that. There's so many things that are brought up as challenges. And then Dr. Feldenkrais, in his brilliance in these lessons, brings in these other, I might say characters, or guides or helpers that come into the story. And then we come back to that challenge, and the challenge is suddenly easy. It's resolved because these other characters came in and helped us along this way in this journey. And when we get to the end, we're a different person than we were in the beginning. We have new resources. We have a different perspective on ourselves. We have a new updated self-image. It's just brilliant. It's a brilliant little way to work with ourselves.
It really is. And I encourage you, listeners, to actually listen, partake in an awareness through movement lesson. You can look at Achieving Excellence at Al Wadley's vast library of lessons to choose from, or go to my website, donnaray.com, and have a look at what I'm offering there. And do some awareness through movement if you haven't already, because it's life-changing. It'll change your narrative, your self-image, and you're just going to feel really good.
So, really good.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to follow up with a question, send an email to info@feldenkreisforlife.com. We would love to hear from you.
You can learn more about us on our websites.
You can find Al at achievingexcellence.com.
You can visit my site to join my classes and reach out to me for private lessons online or at my Longmont studio. You'll find my store, Feldenkrais store, there as well. We can purchase books, audio products, and videos. Donna's website is donnaray.com.
And if you visit my website, you'll find that I'm offering individual sessions, group classes in the Feldenkrais Method, mentoring groups, professional Feldenkrais training program information, and recorded lessons.
Thank you again so much for joining us. I look forward to you hearing us next week.
Bye now.
Bye.